Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk About Myths, baby. It's Michaela Pongovich here to introduce you all to the next episode with a past guest, Ryan Denson, here to talk more sea monsters. God, do we love sea monsters on this show. But I will say there was a little too much praise for seals happening on this one. I will forgive these two for their seal love. They didn't grow up at a time when seals were terrorizing children and dragging them to the depths as I did. Little, West Coast Canada, early 2000s reference. Anyways, that's fine. We also have some talk here about the current troubles happening at Exeter. And please feel free to go to our description to sign the petition to help stop the university from gutting the humanities department. This is ridiculous. Can we stop just going after the humanities generally? I don't know. That's up to patriarchy, colonialism. I'm tired. I finished my thesis last night. Brain isn't working. Just mad. Just mad about things, but that's fine because we're going to talk sea monsters on this episode. Love you all. Conversations, the wonders of the ancient and mythical Mediterranean. More sea monsters with Dr. Ryan Denson.
I am so excited to have you back, Ryan Denson. Oh, doctor now, of course. You were doctor on the last episode as well. But Dr. Ryan Denson, because you come and you tell me about sea monsters, and that is why you are always a fan favorite. I actually talked to my roommate and I was like, oh, today's episode will be good because it's the sea monster guy. And even she has heard of the sea monster guy. So thank you, as always.
Oh, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be back on the podcast, and it's always just great to speak to you.
I mean, thank you. I love when I have guests who are comfortable like this and also want to come back and tell me more things. And I mean, when they're about sea monsters, there's a real bonus there. I'll never forget, like, just basically yelling questions about sharks at you from our first episode. I feel like I barely let you talk, and I just had to talk about sharks and whales the whole time. So it's always good to have you back.
I have made a new discovery on sharks too that we'll get
Oh my God.
into in
Oh,
a bit too.
that's exciting.
Uh,
Well, then we'll introduce it that way. The reason that you're back with more sea monsters is that you have a sea monster book coming out. So do you want to just do a quick introduction about that before, and then we can dive into sort of everything else?
Yes, so the book itself is called A Zoo Biography of the Ancient Sea Monster. It is being published by Bloomsbury for their Ancient Environment series. So I'm very happy to be in that series in particular because the environmental humanities are really taking off these days. So it is basically going to be focusing on the Ketus as a sort of lost classical monster in a way, and basically recovering the image of that. And that's essentially, the majority of the book. And we'll talk in a second too about, why it sort of gets lost as well. And specifically for your audience too, Bloomsbury has been very kind enough to give me a discount code that will be valid on pre-orders if they would like to pre-order it as well, up until September 2nd, I believe.
That's so cool. And we just said this off air, but I'm going to say it in here again. You're the first guest who has come equipped with a promo code for a discount. And I actually think that's so cool, especially because these academic books are pricey. We all know, they're so worth it, but they're always so pricey. So it's so
Mm-hmm.
nice to have that. So yeah, to the listeners, that is all in the episode's description. You can get a discount, which is that's just cool. I'm proud of your publisher. I'm impressed that you asked also and got one. Like, that's generally great. So it's very exciting.
Yes, it's very generous of them too. So we appreciate that very much, the support there.
Yeah.
Before we get into the book, there is something else I want to talk about to bring to your audience's attention really quickly as well. And it's something it is very close to me. As people might know, I did my PhD at the University of Exeter, which is it is a big humanities school as well. I mean, became kind of famous for that. It is in the Russell Group for that reason, because a lot of their leading research is in the humanities specifically. So you can do all sorts of fun things at Exeter. Obviously, do a PhD on sea monsters. They also have an MA program on magic and occult sciences, which they are now starting. You can do a PhD in magic and occult sciences at
That's so
Exeter
cool.
as well. Um, and I preface this to tell your audience, to sort of make them aware of a situation that's going on there, which is last month, the University of Leadership announced that they are looking to now cut 150 full-time academic jobs at the
That's so
University of
wild.
Exeter. And this is supposedly possibly going through later this summer as well. So they're trying to very quickly push this through. But the Exeter branch of the UCU, which is the sort of faculty union for universities in the UK, has pushed back against this. And as they have pointed out quite rightly, I think this is a sort of manufactured crisis, because the university leadership, their rationale for doing so is that they're on a £5 million deficit, which sounds bad, but as the UCU and others have pointed out, the university actually has over 200 million in cash reserves. So this is not,
How is that
it
a
sounds
deficit? Like,
exactly, it's a yearly deficit, but it is by no means a situation where the university is in danger of running out of money, going out of business, or anything like that. And
mhm.
the other thing the UCU and others have pointed out is they're looking to, fire so many academics, yet the vice chancellor has a salary of just under £400,000 per year, and many other executive, provost and that sort of thing also make extremely high pay, and they keep getting a higher raise. So again, this is one of those things to point out. And I wanted to preface this by saying, how good Exeter is for the humanities, with another alarming fact, which is 85% of the people being targeted for these cuts are in the humanities. And the university has provided no justification for that imbalance whatsoever. They have, ignored any requests from the UCU or others to explain why this is occurring, why they're targeting the humanities at, such a high-end university for the humanities like this. And this is, as I say, affecting all of the humanities in Exeter, but I want to talk specifically about where I come from with the classics department there. And, your audience will be familiar with a couple of other people there.
Yeah.
It is targeting many of them, and Exeter's classics department is ranked the fourth in the UK, and I think within the top 50 in the entire world.
That is so
100,
wild.
yeah, it is world leading as a department. 100% of their research outputs are ranked in the ref, the sort of UK, ranking for research outputs as being internationally excellent. 100% of their research, everything they're putting out. And your listeners might remember two people there in particular, Emily Hauser, who does amazing work on research on women in the ancient world, and
Yeah.
she also writes her own novels as well,
And is
and does
generally the best. Emily's a good friend
yes,
of the show. And yeah. I know I've seen
yes,
her writing about it. Because did she write an article or for the Guard? I know she wrote about the
on
Odyssey. And now I'm like, but did she? I feel like she also wrote about Exeter, and I just will link to it if I'm right.
Yes, I mean, so people, yes, if you go to Emily Hauser's social media, she is one of the people that is leading the charge against this. And as she and others have pointed out, I, you know, it is again, it's very ideologically motivated. There was another colleague of ours that said that it was, ideological vandalism, and
Hmm.
we should not shy away from calling this because Emily is one of the people. It has not been decided yet who is going to potentially be fired by this, but Emily has already posted on her social media that she is one of the people being targeted for this. So again, you can see the sort of haphazardness that this is happening at a humanities university, and it's targeting major people.
Yeah.
The other person, I mean, in the Exeter Classics department that your audience might remember is a good friend of mine, Daniel Ogden, good friend,
Hmm.
and he was my PhD supervisor as well. Um, it is a remarkable achievement for an academic to be a world leading expert in one subfield of classics, but it's no exaggeration or anything to say that Daniel is a world leading researcher and academic in multiple fields within classics. He's talked on here about magic and curses and ancient religion. He is a world leading expert in
Yeah.
that, and in folklore and in mythology.
He is on,
uh,
his name is on a lot of books that have been used on this
exactly.
show for like the entirety of the show. Yeah.
Exactly. So all of that, and maybe less distant from the myth route, is he's also an expert in Hellenistic history, Alexander the Great, Hellenistic dynasties, that sort of thing. So again, it's no exaggeration. I'm not just saying this because he was my PhD supervisor or anything like that. He is a world-leading expert in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yet he is, like Emily, one of the people being potentially targeted for this. So it just goes to show that the fact that they're so heavily targeting the humanities and with no discrimination for who is doing what work or how much they're putting, because both Emily and Daniel too, they are well known for their teaching within the department as well. So on that side too, the classics department is doing quite well. There's just no justification for this.
Yeah.
And I should say too, I mean, again, we don't know who might get fired or anything like that. But regardless of who goes and who stays, this puts a lot of pressure on the people that remain, both the students and the faculty, because it's going to end up shoving more teaching loads onto other faculty members. Class sizes increase, and anyone that's been in a university, the difference when you have a giant 50, 60 person class you're dealing with versus a smaller 10-person or so seminar. It's worse on both the teacher and the student. So this very much does impact the quality of teaching and things going on at Exeter. And this is why I wanted to speak out against this. And one thing that your audience can do, it's a very small thing, is that the UCU has put up a petition, and I'll give you the link to this. It's gotten, I think, over 35,000 signatures as well. Several people, MPs, former MPs, I think Stephen Fry as well, have shared this, because this is for all the reasons that I've talked about here, this is just massively unpopular. And so if any members of your audience, I mean, if they've enjoyed my work or Emily's work or Daniel's work, we've also had a couple of other Exeter PhDs, Freddie Kempton, Imogen Briscoe, soon to be Charlotte
I was like,
Spence.
I know that there would be, I mean, just through you alone, I know I've gotten so many guests, but I was like, I can't name them off the top of my head, so thank you.
Yes, and even as those ones are not faculty members that are being targeted by this, they are examples. Freddie has done work on Ovid, time in Ovid, Imogen, similar work on Ovid and his portrayals of women. These are things that you can do with a strong humanities program at a university like Exeter, that this is threatening. And Charlotte, who your audience will meet soon, I think, she does curse tablets. So again, this is another robust thing you can do with a good humanities education. So it is, it sounds insignificant, but it is one little thing that no matter where your audience is, if you can just please, literally take like a minute of your time to pause this podcast and click on the link, and sign that petition to, add your name to that, because it is a very popular petition, we'll say, because these are very unpopular changes that they're doing.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad that you wanted to mention that. I mean, we to the listeners, obviously we prepared this ahead of time, but it is something that, like, for all I'm outside of the academic world, I mean, I'm certainly like adjacent enough that I am able to see that this is it's a bigger issue than just at Exeter. Off the mic, we talked about how there were similar issues in other UK schools and certainly in North America too. And the humanities seems like it's always kind of, or recently, first to the chopping block, particularly as the West certainly gets more and more right wing. And one of the things that cannot be understated about just learning the humanities broadly, like, there's so much to be said for these specific topics and just our love of classics as humans, but humanities broadly are the things that just teach us to be better people. They
Hmm.
are, I mean, I had to double major in English lit and classics, so humanities for life. Like these things are just, they make us better people. They help teach people empathy and just like understanding of the world around. And we were talking off mic about that. I don't know when this episode is going to come out. It'll be soon, but to the listeners, I had just rambled about the Odyssey movie, which I'm trying to remember to call Nolan's Odyssey, because I distinctly don't want to call it just the Odyssey, because it's not. But when we see these Hollywood epics of these stories, like, without people being allowed to learn the humanities, no one is going to know sort of what is going on beyond that. And I'm saying this very poorly, but like the propaganda that exists in movies like Christopher Nolan's Odyssey is going to go considerably less checked than it already does if fewer and fewer people are able to access the humanities, because it truly, these are things, these are learning experiences that just make people more empathetic humans, make you better at understanding the world, other people around you, the history. And if we are only focusing on STEM and things like that, which are very valuable themselves, but without STEM is useless without the humanities, because it's like how AI cannot do all the things that they
Hmm.
think it can, because we require a human interaction. There must be human, understanding in order for anything to keep going as it should. It's hard to
Yes.
put into just a handful of words, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, exactly. I mean, the humanities, especially if you bring up AI, I mean, the humanities are even more important these days, especially when, we're being pushed this AI to sort of push your thinking onto these things. And it's just,
Hmm.
AI is just such a hollow thing. I won't go too much on an anti AI route because, other people can frame this better, but it is definitely oriented in a weird way, a sort of hollowness, a soullessness of knowledge. When the 30-minute thing you put out over this past weekend on the Odyssey, just even off the cuff, is infinitely better than anything that could have been auto generated by AI slop or whatever. Because it is a human who is very aware of the humanities and using that to critically think about this piece of media, comparing it with another ancient piece of media. Neither one has particularly good representations of women, but seeing that, using that comparative focus, is what the humanities is strong at, and how we can understand the world around us. But these sort of ideological pushes to eliminate the humanities, they're motivated by what seems to be a sort of very thin conception for what people want education to be, that just outsource stuff to AI and, don't bother thinking too much about this movie, just consume it and all of that
Hmm.
sort of stuff. And it's just a rather ugly image of what you want education to be and what you want human life to be, because
Yeah.
the humanities just add depth to it. I saw a meme a couple of weeks ago that was just like, me and my humanities degree against the world. And I think I'm going to print that on a t-shirt or something and wear that, because just, I will never, I mean, give in to this sort of thing. I mean, if the Exeter situation seems distant from a lot of your listeners, it is happening in many other places. I was talking to a friend in Australia, that I'd mentioned what I said about, the vice chancellor's salary at Exeter. And she was telling me that, well, vice chancellors at a lot of Australian universities, they regularly make over $1 million
Oh my
a year.
god.
And a lot of them are pushing to, downsize the humanities and all that for the same
Yeah.
sort of bullshit, supposed financial reasons that aren't as serious as they make them out to be. So it's just bleak time. So it's like, I would encourage your audience, yes, to sign the UCU petition for the Exeter thing, but do what you can to support the humanities wherever you are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a university context. That's something obviously, key to where I am and where I'm focusing in. But this is a much larger issue beyond just academics, jobs, and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Support the humanities where you can. I was very happy to hear in the past couple of weeks that my little hometown in Georgia in the U.S., they might be getting a new library. So
Huh,
little things like
that
that
is good.
is always helpful. So
Yeah.
just do what you can to support the humanities in whatever you can, whether it's just sharing a podcast or thinking critically about media and stuff like that, because it makes the world a better place, I think, against
Honestly.
these AI tech oligarch bullshit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. I could go on for 1,000 years, so I won't. But thank you for using the term critical thinking, because ironically, that was the term I couldn't think of when I was rambling about the importance of the humanities, because brains are hard. Um, but it's true. I mean, like, it's not about, not about like whether you want to go to this university, or somebody who wants to go to this university. Like, it's not about that. It's about the wider issues of humanity and how the learning about humanity fits in with that. And it's one of these things that sounds so straightforward, like, well, I think as humans we should probably learn about what it is to be human, which
Yeah.
is all that is. And yeah, so just a wider, it's just about the wider acknowledgement that, like, humans are good, and we need them. It's such a weird thing to have to explain to be like, I'm defending the existence of
Humanity.
people and of our ability to think for ourselves. What a weird world to live in. And I mean, also, like, just on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, AI is just stupid for so many other reasons,
Yeah.
including that it's using up all the water. And I recently learned that they don't need water to cool it. They have all of these other ways that they can cool the like servers or whatever, but they're more expensive than water.
Ah,
So they're using fresh water instead, which we
well,
are going to run out of, which is
as long
cool
as
and
the
normal.
billionaires can save a buck, what else
Yeah,
matters? I
Peter
guess
Thiel,
it's
he needed that money to move to Argentina. That's where all of the most reasonable and empathetic
yeah.
people moved. Anyway,
Well,
I've never
anyway,
cared about soccer in my life, but it was cool to see Argentina lose. And on that
anyway,
note, I
to to
sorry.
hopefully give your audience some peace from the madness of the world, we will now talk about sea monsters for a bit,
Exactly.
so you can rest from that horror after you sign the petition, please. But
Exactly. Yep. It is fun to have this as the topic, because so often I have such like serious rants, and then we go into like a very serious topic, which are also good, and I love those episodes. But it's particularly nice to be like, here is the horrors of the world at this moment, and why we all need a little bit more socialism, and also sea monsters. So what?
exactly.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's been years since our first sea monster chat, so I'm not worried about like us retreading anything. I'm probably just going to ask more about sharks and whales. But yeah, I mean, what is, I guess, what is like different that you've gotten out of, or like what are some particular, I don't know, new and exciting ancient whales things?
Yeah, so this is a great, I mean, and it's good to sort of, I mean, if we retread, that's always good, because my thoughts have changed in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. Because I think, if I remember correctly, someone's going to look this up, but I think it was like 2022 we did the first one or
If
so.
that, yeah,
It
2022,
was,
2021. It was a while ago now, which is
yeah,
also weird for me. Cause yeah, I mean, same. My thoughts have changed. The amount that I've grown as like a
yeah,
researcher and stuff too in these 4 years. So I mean,
which is always a good thing too, to,
yeah,
to learn. It's something AI can't really do, of course.
exactly. Let alone
um,
even get the right answer on like what's the capital of
Oh God,
somewhere.
yes. So yeah, I mean, when we did the first one, I was still writing the PhD thesis, so I was still
Yeah.
sort of collecting stuff and didn't really have it all together. And this sort of main innovation with this book, I think I probably said it before. I mean, there are really three main sea monsters in Greco-Roman antiquity. Two of them, Scylla and Charybdis, are kind of attached to the Odyssey. They're very recognizable. They're very known. And in previous scholarship, there was a wonderful monograph by Marian Hopman on Scylla that I think was like 2012. That it's just incredibly comprehensive. That just does
Why
everything on
don't I know
Scylla.
about this?
Um,
Sorry, now I'm
yes,
gonna take notes for myself.
I think it is. It's called Scylla: Myth, Metaphor, and Paradox, which
Ooh.
you know it's great. I mean, it should be reasonably priced these days since it's been out for a while. But that I cannot beat her on Scylla knowledge or the depth and the lucid analysis that she does there. So all things Scylla, go to her in that book, please.
And I will, but can I, because sorry, now you
Mhm.
now you brought it up. And can I, and this is I weirdly have to always have to preface, but I really love the hard C. So I'm just gonna say that. I say Scylla. I know they're both right. But just as I say it differently than you, I want to preface. And also the Odyssey said Scylla, and I know that it's not wrong, but my brain went, oh, I want that hard C sound. In any case, really what I have to say is, has anyone told you what Scylla looks like in Christopher Nolan's Odyssey?
Oh no. Do I want to ask
I
this?
mean,
What?
well, she's really just like a worm blob. Like, I think, do you remember the movie Tremors? Does
Yes.
anyone? Yeah, I mean, it looked like those.
So is it like a hot,
They
like
were like,
top woman half?
no,
Or
we didn't see anything. All you got to see was this weird worm blob. It barely even seemed to have teeth. I was kind of like, what am I looking at? It was kind of, yeah, like a out of the water eel worm blob thing that just snatched the men off the ship. And I also need you to know, and I really don't want to make this about the Odyssey, I'm going to try not to, but Odysseus like rowed and he helped, and he didn't do the thing in the actual epic,
oh,
which is that he like puts on all his armor and he's like, I'm gonna fight you despite everyone smarter than me telling me not to do this. And I thought that was a real missed opportunity. They really made Matt Damon into the hero. Sorry, this is not about the Odyssey, but the Scylla
yeah.
reference, because
Oh,
Scylla's fucking best, and they made her into a weird worm blob.
yes. I thought you were in because we were talking before we hit record
Yeah.
about the sirens, how they're
Yeah.
half naked. Of course he got the naked part right, but they're,
We
they're
we all
fish-tailed, not bird-like as in antiquity. So I mean, God, at this point, did he even read the Odyssey or
honestly,
like that
apparently he
might
read Emily Wilson's, but I don't know which.
the
I saw
did
very little
he read
evidence
the
of that.
he read the front and the back cover maybe, but
Yeah,
did he read inside it? Would be the better question.
I've been
God.
jokingly saying for the last year that my kids' retelling is going to be more accurate, and now I can say with 100% certainty that it's like
Yeah.
100% more accurate. In any case, sorry, that was not meant to be about
Yeah.
the Odyssey or Scylla.
So
I'm really excited to know about this monograph.
no, but that is a good point. And Scylla too, that is more faithful to the Greek.
Thank you.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean,
So
not to be obnoxious about
it's
it,
just,
but
it is just I don't know, an American habit I picked up. A lot of
no, it
people.
is. And it's like, I think the English often have a silent D as
Yes.
well. You're not alone. I just, every time I say it, but then I also feel weird about pronouncing something differently than someone I'm talking to, which is why I explain.
Hmm. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean
So
that
yeah, so
goes.
Scylla's and Charybdis
So
are some of the most famous. Bringing it back to like, who are the other monsters? Because you
yeah.
didn't write about Scylla, I just had to make it about her.
It's all good. But that's actually a good thing because those are very recognizable monsters. They have somewhat been translated into modern media. You don't have to be a Greek mythology buff to know those. You could broadly, same thing with something like, say the Minotaur is the example I
Mhm.
use in the introduction. It's something that, yes, it exists. People are familiar with it because of retellings of Greek myth, but it's also kind of been translated into the modern fantasy genre. So you could broadly, walk down the street today in Canada or Poland or any country pretty much, and people ask someone, they would be familiar with what the Minotaur is, right?
Mhm. Or as the Brits say, just because I'm on a pronunciation bend and my brain is bad, they say Minotaur, and I also find
Oh,
that one incredibly annoying. So
I
had
hate
to
that
say,
one.
yeah,
No, I can't abide by that one,
no
regardless of
good.
what the Greek says.
I
No,
think
we're not
the
going
Greek would be Minotaur because I don't really have like a hard I sound anyway. So I think we're right.
to.
But you're quite right. Like there are these monsters in Greek myth that have become like so well known.
Yes,
And yeah, and I keep
and
distracting you, but I think the point you're making is the Ketos is not one of them.
yes, exactly. So certain monsters have been translated, and some of them have been lost, essentially. And this is the introduction is titled "A Lost Classical Monster"
Hmm.
for that sort of reason, because if you did the same thing, I mean, sort of probably mythology buffs would know this from the Andromeda myth and the Hesione myth, but you wouldn't get very far just asking people. Even some classicists, if their Greek is not good, would not be familiar with what a ketos is because
No,
it
and you'd
just
think like
hasn't been
just sea
translated.
monster. You like, yeah, I feel like you don't like the Ketos does not have like a recognizable,
Hmm.
yeah, visual aspect, especially because even if you are familiar with Andromeda or Hesione, like you're going to, I mean, less so with Hesione because she's not been adapted, but like Andromeda, you're going to think like of the movies, you're going to think Kraken, you're going to think all of these silly things that are not that
Yes.
don't aren't really representative of actual Greek myth, let alone what a Ketos was.
Yes, that just randomly reminded me too. In Clash of the Titans, it's loosely based on the Andromeda myth. I won't get
Yeah.
off on that for a
And then
second,
it's a fucking
but
Kraken.
yes, exactly. And the pure and sole reason why they did that, why they made that change, is just because modern audiences will recognize the name Kraken more than Ketos.
Yeah.
So they've just done that for that reason. Um, but I mean, the question to ask then too is, I mean, why do certain monsters get preserved and translated into modern culture, but why not others? What's the deal
Mhm.
with that? Why is there that unevenness? And what I've said in the introduction is that a lot of monsters, they benefit from what I've called sort of stability of conceptions.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
Minotaur, it is obviously half bull and half man. That's an invariable feature of the Minotaur. Yeah, that might look a little bit different depending on depictions and such. But, there's a whole myth behind why that is and all of that sort of thing. But to be half bull, half man, you're never going to get anything else. It's never going to suddenly be half snake or half fish, because that would be not the Minotaur. That would be something
Yeah.
else, right? But with the Ketos, it is a mixture of different animal parts, but it is not a consistent mixture throughout.
Yeah.
So you will see in ancient art representations. Sometimes it's just like a giant fish. Sometimes it's a slender sort of sea serpent. Sometimes it's a dog-like looking thing. And what I've come up with for this is to basically say it is a sort of interrelated association of Piscine, serpentine, and canine elements. But again, it's not consistent like one third, and one third. It varies because, unlike the Minotaur, the myth that comes from, it kind of doesn't matter what the physical form is. So different
Yeah.
artists do different things. And it gets genericized a lot in a lot of retellings. It just gets translated as sea monster. And, that's not a bad translation, but it does kind of imply something that's so generic that it has no associations, no,
Yeah.
you know, even as it does have variable associations, it's not random. It does, throughout the centuries, come back to canine elements or serpentine elements. So, you know, different shifting things, but it's not random. So this is one of the things that I'm targeting in this book. Throughout the book, I don't just translate the term ketos as sea monster. I use that throughout because an ancient Greek would recognize that sort of monster. They might
Yeah.
have a different picture of it from another ancient Greek, but it is a known monster, even if it is a bit of a variable one.
Well, one thing it's so interesting to hear you say that because I mean, that's so true of how I've kind of taken in Kitoi over the years, but also makes me think of how like mythologically there is like a Kito like as a singular goddess like origin sea monster, and then there's also like Kitos as in just like that's just the word for sea monster, like the word
Mhm.
is both a name, which is of course very common in Greek mythology broadly, that some mythological person is both it's their name and the noun used to describe them, but with Keto it's interesting because it is this goddess who isn't really in stories. She's just kind of like the mother of a handful of characters and therefore known that way, but then simultaneously her name is then used to just describe like all of that kind of, yeah, like, you know, monster in whatever form.
Mm. I'm so glad that you mentioned keto. I have a forthcoming article on her that'll be out next year, actually.
Even
Um,
better.
um, so
She's the
this is
mother of all my
perfect.
favorite people.
So yes, I mean keto does appear in keto. It is derived from ketos, and so I wrote this article for this journal, Creator Nature, which is did ancient Greek mythology have a goddess of sea monsters? So that will be out eventually, and
What is
you
the
know,
answer? Yes, right?
yeah, kind of,
Okay.
in a
I'll
way.
take kind of.
So it depends. Um, what I've done with that, so the reference is in Hesiod, it begins in Hesiod, and other people have theorized this before too. There's a very famous academic called Martin West who he wrote in like the 1950s a commentary on Hesiod, and people still hail it as one of the greatest things that's ever been produced in classics. So that's how good it is. But he theorized that he made up keto from the word ketos, so not
Mm.
the other way around, as some people have tried to claim that the goddess gave her name to the animal when it's
Hmm.
probably the other way around, because we already have ketos mentioned before Hesiod in Homer, so it's likely that he
Right.
made up this. And the reason for it is just to sort of have a matriarch of monsters, or yes, of monsters in this branch in his genealogical system,
Yeah.
because Hesiod's theogony, it's this basic giant, genealogical mapping of a lot of the gods. And Keto is the mother of a lot of monstrous figures. Her entire branch is just
Yeah.
monstrous figures.
So, yes. But then now I want to know what your thoughts are on the fact that most of her children are not related to the sea,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
that's always been so interesting to me. But that, I guess, but then that would make me wonder, like, why Hesiod would pick a sea monster name for this goddess, because she's the just for the listeners, she along with Phorcys, who's like another kind of sea god, is
Mm-hmm.
the mother of um but the Gorgons, so all three of the
Mm-hmm.
Gorgons, but also the Grey, who are, you know, equally kind of bizarre but land dwelling. And those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. But both sets of like three are very specifically these creatures who live like by the sea but not in the sea. But
Mm-hmm.
their parents are both sea monster ish. Do you have an yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an exact answer. I mean, my
No, but more
guess
just
would
thoughts.
be that it's kind of Phorcys. We don't know a whole lot about him, too. I mean,
Yeah.
he is mentioned in Homer, so he's not made up by Hesiod. We know that for sure. It does seem that Hesiod is making Keto to have a female counterpart for this
Ah,
genealogical system, and so it might be that, hey, he's a sea god. I have
right.
another sort of sea goddess there. That might be the rationale for it.
Yeah.
But yes, as you say, I mean, a lot of her
Interesting.
descendants, they don't seem to be sea monsters themselves. And I mean, we do read, there's a lot of ambiguity in the Greek text. I'm not going to get into this too depth because it's hard to say, but there's a lot of ambiguity in the way the pronouns are structured in her
Yeah.
genealogical line,
Right.
to the point where it's possible, because later lines will say, and she gave birth to, and it's completely ambiguous in the Greek text whether that refers back to Keto or back to Echidna or something like this.
Right.
So you'll find versions of her descendants that are drawn in different ways because it's so ambiguous. And that might be
Yeah.
a sort of deliberate feature too for this weird sort of monstrous branch of that genealogical line that Hesiod seems to be stitching together, that he wanted some sort of mother figure for that didn't exist before. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the Hesiod reference. The interesting thing to wonder there is, I mean, Hesiod is a big text, or a big author in the rest of classical antiquity. So, did any ancient authors, this is what I look at in that article, did they take this figure of Keto and do something else with her to envision her further? Because we
Yeah.
have other figures like Triton in Hesiod's Theogony. That's the first reference to him chronologically, but he becomes other sorts of things in a lot of later narratives.
Yeah.
So I was
Including
wondering
plural, like keto.
exactly. There's a lot of
Yeah.
weird differences there. So I wanted to basically put together all of the references to Keto in the ancient world, which was doable because it's less than a dozen, sadly.
Yeah.
We have, what is it? Probably about half of those are just repetitions of Hesiod, so just repeating what he said. And there are some other things. There's a fragment of another Greek author that basically suggests that, I mean, she and Typhon had some sort of kids as well.
Okay.
Don't really know what's going on there because it's a fragment and it doesn't say, who and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what we can tell from the extant evidence is that no one ever develops Keto. She doesn't really do anything beyond what Hesiod does. And so I've said in the article that, I mean, she is a figure there, but she seems to be completely non-agential. She,
Yeah.
she ostensibly exists. She gives birth to this line of monsters, but we don't ever hear any text like you do with other elements of mythology of her interacting with one character or another, or, Zeus or Apollo talks to her, or she has some role in a narrative. There is no role ascribed to Keto whatsoever. She's just sort of like a genealogical contrivance.
Yeah.
Um, and this is really interesting in a lot of ways that they just never did anything. So some people have assumed this is the sort of why I say kind of, if ancient mythology had a goddess of sea monsters, is some people assumed that this would be a figure that it's in Percy Jackson in a little bit, that she's a figure that goes around commanding Kite to attack whoever. There's one of his novels
Yeah.
where that happens. I think Percy and his friends piss her off and she sends sea monsters. Sadly to say, that doesn't occur in any extent bit of ancient text. Sad, I
Yeah. I mean,
wish it
that would be
did.
cool, but
But this is something too, as well, that is one of these interesting differences with the ancient and the modern imagination. So Hesiod created her in that sort of bare bones fashion. She doesn't do anything in his text. And later Greeks and Romans, for better or for worse, they seem to be just content with that, just
yeah.
leaving her as a figure that's always off stage. But we seem to assume and hope for them to be larger, more agential figures.
I mean,
And
that's so true of so
mhm,
many mythical characters. It just makes me think of the number of times, I get asked all the time, like, can you talk about X? Can you talk about this person, this person? And it's just like, not really, sorry. So often they're like functional, which is sort of just what I like that side of it, because to me it is it is this reminder of like what myth is as compared to what we conceptualize as
mhm,
storytelling today, because we want the answers to those questions, but so often these characters are functional, like they are meant to sort of lend themselves to the real world, but otherwise like not included. I mean, this is a different example because she's objectively like more important, but like Hestia is a great example of that too, right? Like functionally Hestia on a day-to-day basis was like
mhm.
invaluable to the ancient Greek world. She was the hearth, she kept everyone's house going, but she does not appear in stories. And I often think, like, it's not really applicable to Keto, but I often think like it's almost indicative of how important functionality was as compared to storytelling. And like, we want there to be a story, but it wasn't necessarily about that. And I mean, Keto's an interesting like comparison to somebody like Hestia,
Yes.
because it's like, what kind of function, but at the same time she is functional.
Yes, and that is a great way to put it too. I mean, using saying functional for it, because her function too. I mean, we sometimes we have to make a distinction too that a lot of people don't realize this. That, I mean, there is a distinction to be made with a lot of characters, that you can have Zeus as a mythological or literary character and Zeus as an object of religious worship. You
Mm.
know, they do have connections too, of course, but there is a bit of a difference. But some figures are only literary characters, or only in textual sources too,
Hmm.
and kind of the opposite with what you just talked about with Hestia. That it's, I don't know, we're somewhat uncomfortable with this when we find this. That, I mean, the Greeks seem to have just made up gods, but it's perfectly natural when you make that literary distinction in the same way we make up literary characters too.
I
Um,
also think it's something to be said for like how we, and in the past few hundred years, however it may be, but like how we as a more modern audience understand this kind of like polytheistic world, because I mean they had gods for everything, but also because like I mean, there's so much we said for like why, and there's like hundreds of gods that don't function in a story or don't like appear in any kind of story, and we often think like the one I can think of off the top of my head is like Ate, who's like considered like a goddess of she hunger, something in that realm. And so there's like a goddess of X, but like there's no story, there's no purpose. It's also just because like X thing was something of concern, and so to
Mm-hmm.
an early culture that is polytheistic in this way, they're going to assign a deity
Mm-hmm.
to it. But we so often, it's so hard for us to kind of conceptualize that. So you think like, oh, goddess of sea monsters, she must be calling upon them, she must be controlling all of these things that we want out of a
Yeah.
quote unquote goddess of sea monsters. But it's important to remember like that's not what they
Yes.
were using these characters for. That's not why they were being
Mm-hmm.
created.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it because I wanted to write that article. I mean, because a lot of people had asked me, I mean, at conferences and stuff and interviews, I mean, what about keto? I mean, she's a sort of big player in your research. And some people have sort of asked me, well, I mean, surely maybe the Greeks like did sacrifices to her to ensure they wouldn't get attacked by sea monsters at sea. And I cannot tell you how much I wish we had an ancient
Yeah,
text that would say that. I wish that was the
that's
case
my answer too. I'm like,
genuinely. Um,
I'm pretty.
that's why I had to say in the article at the end, I mean, I specifically said, regrettably, this did not work that way. But it's another sort of fascinating thing to compare the way their imagination works versus ours. Because I
Yeah.
wrote that article and I submitted it in January. And then I saw a new book came out, which they're not going to be able to see this, but I don't know
Oh
if
yeah.
you've come across this one,
Yeah.
E.S. McLeod's Andromeda,
Yeah. I haven't
which
read it yet, but I've seen a lot of it and done a lot of reposting because it seems great.
it's so good. I
Oh,
highly recommend it
good.
because it takes Andromeda, another figure who doesn't get much agency in her myth, just being
Hmm.
chained to a rock, not given a whole lot, and it makes her the central character along. So it's a sapphic romance with Keto
Oh,
as
I
her
did
love
not know that.
interest.
That's so
Oh, there
cool.
it
Oh
is
my god.
amazing. And so I submitted that article in January, and this came out in May. Fortunately, the article came back that I was able to now put that in there as a reference as well. So that is in there too, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful story and it's a wonderful story. So it's Keto. I mean, it is titled Andromeda, but in some ways, I think of it as a story about Andromeda in Keto because it is a romance. She is just as fleshed out as Andromeda, has a
Oh my god, that's
personality
so
in all of
cool.
that. So that is a beautiful illustration too of the ancient Keto, very bare bones functional use, whereas the modern Keto by McLeod is a living, breathing, emotional character, a very great story. Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
A more of a realistic person in a sense, not just a plugging a hole in a genealogical system or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun of retellings too, right? Like that's why I like them, and that's why I like them as like a counter to
Mm-hmm.
myth, because people want those answers and they don't exist. There is no satisfying goddess of sea monster story, but you can write one and that's cool too.
Yes.
And I'm so glad to know that's what that is about, because I have seen it and I've just been like, I'm always supportive of women writing these retellings and just generally retellings existing, but I did not know about the connection with
Yes.
keto, and now that's
And
way more delightful.
yes, and I've mentioned it specifically in that article too. A lot of people, hopefully not anyone that listens to this podcast, but there's stupid people out there that will say, "Oh, well, but that's not accurate to the original myth," or some dumb bullshit
They love to say
like
original
that.
myth.
Yes, as if there was just one version or whatever. And I said not in this exact words, but I mean, but that's the fucking point. To retell is just expanding and reconfiguring too. So a lot of people will, and this is the sort of like tech bro. Again, they're probably not anyone that listens to this podcast. So I don't know, nobody in this audience probably, but a lot of people do this sort of thing where they sort of slag off these retellings for that. But I want to say, I mean, I did all of this work in January to find all of these references to Keto, which isn't very many. And I
Mm-hmm.
read this, and it's clear that McLeod has done exactly the same sort of stuff, because you read different references and like I can tell which ancient text you
Oh.
got that from, because there is Keto does appear in Hesiod, of course, but Keto is also mentioned in one of the Nyrid list of names, and it's not certain.
Mm.
It's probably just another sort of made up name as well, that they needed 50 names for that as
Yeah.
well. But the way she structures it in the novel, so we don't know what's going on there with that Nyrid name, of course, how they
Mm-hmm.
perceive that, because no one in the ancient world comments on that. But she's basically made her Keto the Nyrid, and she says somewhere in there that her aunt is the monstrous matriarch, I think is how she phrased it. So very
Oh,
much creatively stitching together the ancient material in ways the ancient material
Yeah.
itself doesn't do. So highly recommend that as
That's
well.
so great.
And this is not. It's mentioned in there. I mean, very early on. Keto in the novel, I mean, she has the power to transform into a sea monster, where she's known as the Ketus.
Ooh.
So,
This is goddamn delightful. And I will say, like, I just want it for the audience to know that also I'm gathering that Andromeda is black in that story, right? Which is
yes,
also
exactly.
correct and necessary.
Yes,
But
exactly. And
yeah,
another thing that, I mean, again, Clash of the Titans and other things don't do, because it is set in Ethiopia. The ancient idea of Ethiopia is rather vague, but
yeah,
that
but
is
it's Africa.
explicitly a characteristic. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that is good too. And that's another central thing that MacLeod wanted to do with that novel as well.
I love that because Andromeda is one that I mean I fought for that in past episodes, and like, when all the racist shit was coming out over Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen, like that was something that I was also, there was a couple times where I, on like a burner account not associated with myself, was out here being like, Helen is Helen is depending on how you see it, like, she is descended from, that's the word, I can't find words today, descended from Andromeda, who is
Mm-hmm.
from ancient
Yeah.
Africa slash Greek Ethiopia. So actually it works fine and it's great actually. But
Yes.
so it's nice to see. I mean, Andromeda is very of Ethiopian. I don't even know what I'm saying now. Sorry, my brain is malfunctioning. I'm gonna blip over this. But I'm so glad you brought up that book because I'm just delighted to know the premise now and way more eager to share it with my audience. Um, and generally, so nice to know when you can tell that authors have done that kind of research, because it's often what holds me back from reading retellings, not out of any kind of judgment of the author, because I, do however you want to do it, but for me, I find that's often distracting, is me wondering what source they got it from, or being like, that's definitely totally made, like, there's just, it takes me out because I'm constantly questioning
Mm-hmm.
choices in all these different ways. And so it's so satisfying to hear of one where you're like, I can tell all the sources that you got this from, like
Yeah.
that's what I want.
Yes, exactly that. Because that's the sort of me being a nerd there too. Because I think I
Yeah,
said in the
yeah.
article, like I phrased it more academically, but I'm pretty sure her description of the central event of the Andromeda myth in that book is based on Ovid's version, because it just sounds very Ovidian the way it's
Yeah.
described. So yeah,
Oh, I love that. Also, Ovid's is like one of the most detailed stories of
yes,
Andromeda because so little actually exists. Another great example of these myths that we know were like, they were just more functional than or in a way that just didn't survive in writings.
hmm
Okay, speaking of that, now I'm taking myself on a tangent. Um, do you? I mean, maybe this. There's so much to talk about when it comes to the Kitoi is Kita. That's that Kitai.
Kite,
Yeah,
Kite,
great. I'm
yeah.
trying to imagine it spelled. But yeah, there's, I'm sure, so much to say. But when it comes to any kind of, like, I'm just fascinated by lost or fragmentary work. So was there anything particularly interesting there, or do you find that she's just sort of so, or not? I say she, I mean the monsters broadly too. But was there anything fragmentary that you're particularly interested by, or you think maybe there's something lost that we don't know?
Oh,
I mean,
that
yeah,
yeah.
maybe
I
that's a
mean, there are
broader
a lot
question,
of
but
there's a lot of interesting things we don't know. I mean, there is one bit, and this is one of those things that I've sort of developed my thoughts on a bit more, because I say this canine element too,
yeah.
and people have that's usually the thing people question me about, because you can understand why a sea monster has piscine or serpentine stuff, but why the hell canine type stuff?
Yeah.
And this is something I wrote another article on specifically the canine stuff with Scylla a little bit too, because there are canine
Yeah,
elements
she's
of
very
her.
explicitly. Yeah.
Yes, and we hear it as early as the Odyssey, actually, because it's mentioned in Book 12 of the Odyssey. When Circe is describing Scylla, it said that she snatches up dolphins, sea dogs, and whatever greater Kite wander into the
Right.
straits. So right there at the beginning of Greek literature, we got some sort of reference to a sea dog. And really, I'm translating it there, but it really is just
Hmm.
the word dog. They don't even add the C part a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
times. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is an interesting habit. So if and we see that in later texts too. And it's likely these are references to sharks and possibly other sea monsters. That there's not really a fine distinction there between what is a shark and what is not, because these things just become so blurry. But the question still remains: why look over at something in the sea and name it a dog? Where does this come from? I mean,
Yeah. Are
this
there
seems like,
seals? We talked about. Oh, no, of course there are seals because there are
yes.
seals in the Odyssey. Because then I go, seals are dog-like, but at the same time, it makes me think like, I mean, what like I mean, I guess dogs have been domesticated for so long.
Hmm.
But like it's just that's interesting to me broadly that word is kind of used, I guess, but then at the same time it does continue on deeply into English and it's like, which came first, chicken
Yes.
or the egg. But like because, I mean even and here's where my shark nerdery comes out. But I mean there are multiple like types of sharks that are called dogfish in varied forms
Hmm.
and so like these are things that I don't know. It's interesting. How
Yes,
much do we know
exactly.
that seals were there? Because what are the seals called in ancient Greek? Then in the Odyssey, they're
Phoque.
clearly not. They're what?
Well, this is the Greek word is phoque.
Okay.
Um, so, I mean,
Okay.
this is
Like,
another interesting thing too, that this is in there, because I've said, the Ketos is Piscine, Serpentine, and Canine, but I've also said some other elements too, one of
yeah.
which is seals. And this is something that gets lost in translation a lot. But the Greek text of the Odyssey, when you're in Book 4 in the Proteus episode, where Menelaus and his men, they've been covered with seal skins to wait out for Proteus. The way it's described in the text, the poet is actually using the word phoque and the word ketos interchangeably, which
Ooh.
basically implies that he seems to have understood seals as a type of ketos.
Yeah.
Because this term, it's very variable. Sometimes it can be literal dog like, sometimes it can be seal like looking in conception. And so this is an interesting case where sort of imaginary animal gets intertwined with a real animal in that way. Hmm?
Do we know etymologically? Because like it feels to me like Kidos broadly is used to describe like danger things in the
Mm-hmm.
sea, right? Because they're sharks, they're whales, they're I guess, but dolphins were always something separate, weren't
Yes.
they?
Yeah, dolphins are generally separate. We do hear a lot of cases where Kite kind of chase dolphins. So, and it
Yeah.
might be because, dolphins are a bit more well known in a sense. I mean, it's not that seals weren't well known, but they're more distinctive in a way, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And they
And
have certain
often like
behaviors.
we know that they would follow ships and
Yes.
they jump out of the water in ways that like
Yes.
just objectively easier to witness than a lot
Mhm.
of the things that live in the depths.
Yes. So dolphins, from my estimation, because I also do a section where, okay, what is not included in this category? And I've said,
Ooh, yeah.
dolphins are one of them. But also, I mean, people might think of later stuff with these sort of cephalopod sea monsters. So I've said that octopuses, they seem to have considered those basically different, because that again has a very distinctive shape too.
Yeah.
And
And
that
they were
seems to be
very aware
not.
of octopus because
Yes, they
they
like
have them.
those.
Yeah.
um, but other thing, because the seal thing, that could account for part of the dog like stuff, because seals
Yeah.
are in terms of, so seals in one case, I mean, they're very dog like in terms of their facial shape and stuff, and they can be trained a little bit. I
Yeah.
actually, last summer, there is a seal sanctuary up in Gdansk, on the Hell Peninsula, as it's called. I went up there, and they're amazing animals. I'm
They
obsessed with
are. I mean,
them.
because of where I grew up, I fucking love seals. Like seals, they're everywhere in Victoria. It used to be, I mean, that you could just go and like toss them fish,
Mhm.
but I mean, they are delightful animals.
Yes,
And yeah, sorry,
no,
let's talk about seals.
just agreeing exactly, because I spend an inordinate amount of my time. If I opened up my phone to Instagram, the For You page is just seal videos everywhere, because that's
I mean, they're
what I
really
do.
cute and weird.
They're amazing. I love them. I might send you some seal videos on
Please.
Instagram now, because they're beautiful animals. And I am writing another article on seals and this sort of stuff, um, because sad to say, in the ancient Mediterranean world, they were mass hunted for their skins.
Okay, because I was
It's
gonna
just
say like I can't imagine seals being very common there now.
They're not.
Yeah.
So this scene we have in the Odyssey, where I mean, it's on the coast of Egypt, where there's
Yeah.
masses of seals. This seems to be their natural habitat,
Mm.
because human encroachment has pushed them out further. The type of seal, the Mediterranean monk seal, at this moment, I think it's classified as a vulnerable animal, like one step above endangered.
Yeah.
Not a great position, but they've suffered a lot from human coastal dwellings, but it seems their natural habitat is to be fairly abundant on the beaches. There are references, I think it's like 16th century, when Portuguese explorers started sailing down West Africa. There'd just be seals everywhere along the coast. But
Yeah.
of course, you don't see this as much
I will
these
say,
days.
in nice news for the seals, you do see that on the west coast of Canada and probably
Oh,
the States too.
good. Can
Like, yeah, there's, I went, I mean, whale watching is a problematic thing, so I won't say that I like support it generally, but like a good decade ago, I went
Mhm,
whale watching, and there are a number of little islands that have just like a lighthouse on them because we have
mhm.
obviously hundreds of islands off the coast, and you will just go to an island that's this tiny little island and it's just covered, like you'll just go by
Oh,
it in a boat and it's covered in seals and
oh,
like only seals.
that
So
is so wonderful.
yeah, I do. I mean, at least in the Pacific, I mean, I'm sure that they have still, in there's not, as good as they used to, or as not many numbers as there used to be, surely, but I definitely
Mhm.
grew up seeing a fuck ton of seals in the best possible way, I will say.
Hmm. Oh, that's interesting.
They're
So, I mean,
delightful. They do love to just pile up on islands. That I can say from
they're amazing
experience.
animals.
Yeah,
So
they
I
just
mean,
lie out in the sun.
we have a very positive views of them today, because when I went to go
Yeah.
see the seal show, you can, they won't let you do this, of course, but you can, if you wanted to, you could reach your hand out over the open water where the seals are. It's just a sort of
Yeah.
like low concrete barrier. It's not like a cage where a lion or
Yeah.
something would be. They're not regarded as dangerous animals,
Oh
which is
no.
very different from the ancient world, that we read references that the seals could defeat bears or something like this, and they're considered very ferocious and very dangerous animals, probably due in part due to this overlap with the Ketos, this cultural
Yeah.
conception that they're a type of sea monster.
That was
um,
going to be my question then too, because I
mhm,
was, I take in a Ketos as being dangerous, but then if, like you say, I don't think of seals as being dangerous. But I guess, if you're just like seeing them from afar and they're weird, and I
yeah,
guess you can understand them seeming dangerous, at least in that kind of realm. But I also, this is so the one of the few things I really specifically remember from our first conversation is just generally me like vocalizing thoughts on how the ancient world would be learning about these things, because they're not exploring the sea
mhm,
in detail. Like, we know how mysterious it is for us now, and we know everything or so much about it, and yet still, so it would be so much about like what little elements they have access to, and what little things, and then also the imagination, right? Because, and I'm sure I said this last time, but it's like somebody gets a bit by a shark, but you don't see the shark, and then you see a seal or you
yes,
see a whale carcass, and you're like, oh my god, like these are the scary things of the
yes.
sea. it's just so mysterious.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it. And especially, I mean, whales can't actually swallow humans. And I think if
And
one
yet so
did,
many ancient stories will tell you they can.
I think if one, I don't know, I'm not a marine biologist, but I feel like if one actually did, it would probably kill the whale. It would cause some serious health problems. I don't think they can digest something that big. But from the perspective of, you see this gigantic thing that's, beached itself somewhere, you would assume it must have eaten a lot. Because
Yeah.
this is a story too that it becomes big in the Christian period with Jonah, of course. And Jonah's whale, we know it as today, is not actually a whale. Ketos is the term described over and over again. And there's something, I mean, this is a new thing that I found out. I wouldn't call it a fragment because it's in a very prominent author, Augustine of Hippo, the church father, him and a couple of other sources. They actually mentioned that, because in late antiquity, not everything snaps to becoming immediately Christian all of a sudden. There's this sort of
Right.
tension with all these pagans around. And Augustine, he actually complains that a lot of pagans are out there, they're making fun of the Jonah story because they consider it ridiculous, right? You guys, this religion is one of its central profits is about this silly tale of a man, getting eaten by a sea monster and survives it. Apparently, what a ridiculous new religion we have on our hands here.
Okay, what is the overlap then with Lucian? Because in Lucian's True History, the the so-called the Lucian character gets swallowed by a whale, and then inside that whale there's like an ongoing war and like land
Yeah,
grabs within the
he,
whale. Is that before or after the
that's
biblical?
before it. So
Yeah,
Lucian's about
even
second
better.
century CE. Some
Yeah.
people we don't know for sure. The Book of Jonah is written in the original Hebrew in 4th century BC. Some people have wondered if Lucian is parodying the Jonah
That,
story. It's not impossible. We don't have any exact evidence of it, but he does seem to be parodying the fact that people claim these things are so gigantic in a lot of
yeah.
ways, because there's a lot of exaggerated things, which I'll
Yeah, I mean
remind
they have
me.
a war inside the whale because
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Lucian. He's got to have a war whenever he's doing weird things like that. But
And in Lucian's text, he says it's 1,500 stades long, which, if I remember correctly, in modern measurements, I think that's like 200 something kilometers or so. Um, Ridiculously giant. So he's sort of parodying a lot of
yeah,
stuff that's out there, these exaggerations. But the other end of it too is people like Augustine, for their religion, they want to defend the plausibility of the story. So this is the interesting thing about Augustine's references. He actually mentions, well, I mean, he says, people think this is ridiculous, but all we have to do is point to the sea monster bones that are on display in Carthage. So
ooh,
see, likely whale bones or something like that, because we know in other cases too, in cases where the Andromeda myth is sometimes said to occur at Joppa, there were allegedly sea monster bones being exhibited there, and it was said that this is the monster from the myth. So whale
cool.
bones kind of give what seems to be proof of these sorts of things, and religious authorities like that can point to that and say.
Yeah.
And he says something like, you imagine what it must have been like, maybe a full whale skeleton, because he literally says something like it's so big that it could easily admit a person into it. So we're correct,
Wow.
guys. Stop making fun of our religion. And it's amazing. This happens in multiple sources too, because there's another one, a Greek author named Cyril of Alexandria, who defends the Jonah story in another way by, pointing to references to the Hesione myth in Lycophron, that they're claiming that it's basically, this Greek text, this pagan text, is basically foreshadowing what will happen with our religion. So they didn't necessarily kick out all of the pagan literature or stuff, but they found ways to interpret it to prove that their religion is correct.
Yeah, like how some Christians talk about living alongside dinosaurs.
Yes, in the modern world, we have that.
Yeah.
because there's one more of these two that I can think of too. Another Christian source called Jerome. He translated the Bible into Latin, among other things. But he defends the Jonah story because he has to, and the way that he defends it is actually, he makes fun of the pagans for exactly the sort of stuff that Zeus does. That you think we're ridiculous. You guys have a story where your god, turns into a swan and sleeps with women and stuff. So
I mean,
if
he's not
that's
wrong.
possible, then
Yeah.
lay off our religion.
Oh, that's so delightful. Those moments, that like interaction of I mean, just like mentalities, I guess, and then
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
way it echoes down to us. It's fascinating.
because
Well, and
it's
no, sorry, go ahead.
what I was going to say. Because it's a lot of people too ask as what I mean. Did the Greeks believe in this? And that's a very sort of you know you wouldn't ask that. It's a very sort of generalizing question. If you ask it today, did the Canadians believe X or Y? Well, that's however many millions of people. It's a very oversimplified thing. But with
Yeah.
these sorts of things, you see, they believe, sure, but in different ways. And someone like
Yeah.
Lucian, I don't know his personal thoughts on sea monsters, but the fact that he's parodying it, he's poking fun at these sorts of
Yeah.
people. Um, because one of the other, I think I knew this before when we talked, but it's a fascinating one. So Lucian's his narrative, I mean, they sail westward out of the Pillar of Hercules, and they go to the moon and back
Yeah.
before the sea monster bit occurs. This
They
whole
have a
thing,
war between the moon and the sun because everything has to have a
you know,
war.
as you do. But then
And they
he
ride on
writes.
like bugs and stuff.
Yes, exactly. So it's meant to be deliberately farcical. That's why it's 200 something kilometers or something. But he's probably making fun of people. We do hear these references to Kite in the Atlantic as being exceptionally massive. Diodorus Siculus, he has this reference to the Pillars of Hercules, that he says the reason Hercules built them up the way they are was to keep the largest of sea monsters out of the Mediterranean.
Oh, cool.
Um, and it depends on where you're reading that myth. But if someone reading that, if they were aware of the actual distance of the Strait of Gibraltar, I think at its narrowest point, it's like 14 kilometers or something
Yeah.
like that. So
Still pretty big.
gigantic.
It'll
So
just go to
that's
Megalodon, maybe.
yes, exactly. So it's another interesting way. It was a way to sort of organize the world. That I mean,
Yeah.
they knew that we have other references to. Yeah, the smaller ones are in the Mediterranean. And the implication is there's larger ones on the edges of the earth, like what
Yeah.
you'll still see in medieval maps with it famously, here be dragons or something. The
Right.
monsters, the crazy shit is always on the edges like that.
Well, and this is when I'm sure I told this story last time, but when I was in Greece once years ago with a Greek friend who I just met on like that trip, I think, but we thankfully became friends. I say that because of the story, but we were at a beach and
Hmm.
I was talking, or I have a shark tattoo, so maybe that was what it was, but somehow
Oh,
sharks came up. And I was talking, I could talk about sharks forever. And so and I was talking about like, oh, I love sharks, I'd love to see a shark, and I forget how it came up, but basically this Greek friend of mine was like, oh yeah, but there are no dangerous sharks in the Mediterranean. And I was like, I mean, yes there are. And this guy's like born and raised in Athens, and he was like no, and I was like, I mean, yes there are. And I googled it and it was like, yeah, there are great whites in the Mediterranean, like.
hmm.
But I just think of that as like, I think it's culturally like a mentality too that kind of gets carried on. It's just sort of, well, the Med is really small, and like, I don't know, maybe that makes it feel a little safer. It's just kind of delightful. I mean,
Yes.
I think great whites are rare in the Med, but like they're in there. The water's all connected, guys.
Yes, exactly. Because I mean, I think it's supposedly relatively calm. It's not, I think like the Pacific Ocean is much more
Oh yeah,
turbulent
I
and
mean,
things like that. So
yeah.
it's not entirely wrong. Probably the Atlantic is more turbulent too. We do hear
And I mean,
people.
great whites are primarily in the Atlantic, just
Yes,
scientifically. So like that makes, it does make sense too.
yes.
And the Med is so calm. And one thing I always notice about it as someone who grew up on the west coast of Canada is that like also the tide doesn't move almost at
Hmm.
all. And I wonder too like how that affects kind of what ends up living in there.
Hmm.
But okay, I have to go back to when you're talking about them having Keto skeletons displayed, because one, this is where, again, I know I told this story last time, but this is where I say that because of where I grew up, my high school did have the skeleton of a whale hanging over a stairwell, a random back stairwell. And I found out the story, and it was that like a biology teacher, his class found it in a garbage dump somehow and were able to turn it into a class project to put it back together. And it is displayed at Claremont Secondary School. Bizarre high school reference to make. But it makes me think, because I could picture staring at this whale skeleton as I was like 15. How would they, like, how do you imagine they would have put it together? Because surely it was very wrong, because they didn't fully know what like the actual living creature looked like. So then it makes me think, like, what was it? Was it multiple bones? I mean, I know I brought this up last time too, but certainly they would have been finding shark teeth, like
Yes.
shark teeth are some of the most common things you can find. And also because their bones, or they don't have bones, rather they have cartilage, and so it doesn't survive. But you would have shark teeth, and then you would have whale bones, and maybe even something as big as like a megalodon tooth. And so maybe these ancient people are seeing a beached whale or a beached skeleton of a whale or whatever, and then also the teeth of sharks, putting it all together. So then it makes me think, like, visually, what on earth were they recreating with these skeletons?
Yes. I'll be honest, you were brilliant, because I've never thought of this, to be honest, because now it's popping through my head. There's so many references, because, I mean, there's a lot of sort of, the site at Joppa where they claim that the Andromeda myth occurred there. It seems to be like an ancient tourist type thing. But,
Oh, cool.
how would the locals have arranged the bones for
Yeah.
that? And we have a reference in Pliny that about a century prior, a Roman official, he allegedly brought the bones of the sea monster from the Andromeda myth and paraded rather them down the street of Rome. And what does that look like is now the
Yeah.
immediate question there.
Yeah. I just think it could have been wacky. Like, it could have been right, and it could have been off the
Yes.
charts insane. It could have been like a skull, and then they had like 8 megalodon teeth that they would like put under it and be like, these were their teeth. Like,
Yes. And what bits are missing too
yeah,
is
exactly.
because another one that we have is Pausanias. He mentions the bones of Aeacus were kept in a temple to Asclepius, and Asclepius is a god with a lot of serpentine associations. So
Yeah.
you wonder, I mean, maybe the one that Augustine was seeing, it had the full rib cage, so he could tell, yeah, definitely a human could fit in that. But what if this one was just the spinal column, so it looks like a giant long serpent or something like that?
Yeah. It just, there's so many weird possibilities for like, what?
God, that is an ingenious point, because that could account for different, they're all maybe all whale skeletons and stuff like that, but what is left and what is not could determine what they're thinking of it as.
Well, and like, again, I know from bizarre personal experience that whale skeletons do look like a whale once you've put them together. Correctly. But then at the same time, like, I mean, I'll never get over the fact sharks don't have bones. The only thing that survives after they decompose is the teeth. And so you're left with these super scary teeth. And I mean, I don't know how likely it would have been that anyone could have come across like a blue whale, but imagine a blue whale skeleton, and then you also have megalodon teeth. Like, you're imagining a megalodon straight up is like living in the waters. And that, yeah, I could speculate about this forever.
Yes, that's fascinating, because there's a sort of famous article on whale bones that some archaeological dig, they found what seems to be a whale scapula. It was hidden in a Athenian whale that they were is what I'm mixing the words. The thing you get the water out of. And why is this object there? One interpretation of what this object was used for is it seems to have cut marks into it, and they think that maybe someone was using it as a cutting board in their kitchen.
Oh my
something
God.
like that. Which is, did you just find that one piece that just showed up on the beach one day and use that in your kitchen or something? What else was left?
Yeah.
God, I mean,
Well,
the
and
teeth.
so much washes up on shore from like so
Yes.
much stuff, you know. And now it doesn't seem like as I mean, obviously we have garbage and stuff today, but I still remember like I mean, I was a very young and I know I was maybe like 4 or 5 and we went to Florida and I know we came back with like a Ziploc bag full of shark teeth that my dad
Hmm.
and I had just like found on the beach. And I mean, I don't know how common that is now, but I know, I mean, certainly that long ago, like imagine the volume of stuff that's washing up. I mean, you know, you think of it now, like even just I love going to tide pools and just like digging around and like seeing what I can find in there. Can you tell I grew up like also homeschooled on the West Coast? My God, it comes out only in my episodes with you. Um, but like I just yeah, the ocean is so mysterious to us that it just makes me so obsessed with the idea of like what on
Yes.
earth they were imagining. And this idea that yeah, like they sometimes look like snakes and fish or dogs, and yeah, having just the bits and pieces. Like think of what does a seal skeleton look like too, right? Like these are all things that they would have, and I mean, I'm sure that they would have, you know, a full seal would have washed up, and like a whale here
Hmm.
or there. But it's
Yeah.
also, you know, to so important to remember like that we're talking like 1,000 years of history too, right? And so it's like what kind of evolution of that idea did they have, and what
Hmm.
went further. And sorry, my ADHD is going wild, but I also want to know because dolphins were not keto
Hmm.
ketoi ketai.
Yes.
But at the same time, so in my head I go okay, because well, I want it to be because dolphins aren't scary, but dolphins are scary. And specifically ancient Greek and Roman depictions of dolphins are evil demons of the sea. They always look like they are going to viciously murder you. Like Greek and Roman, specifically Roman dolphins are
Hmm.
terrifying. Do we know if they were scared of dolphins? Do you have any thoughts on dolphins or why they don't count as like ketai? It's just so
I
interesting to me.
It's interesting. I mean, you bring up the art element. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of any reason to be scared of dolphins
Neither.
specifically, unless
But
you're
then like
confusing them with other
craziest
things, of
feet.
course. Um,
Yeah, and like
we
Roman paintings, they're like they literally look like they're going to
Yeah, we
you.
do read. I mean, this is an aberrant reference, and this is in no way representative of how they thought of dolphins. But I've said it in the book where the section where I discount dolphins, it's only rarely, so seals, it's very common for seals to be interrelated with um, sea monsters, Kite,
Mhm.
but it only happens in like two different instances in with dolphins, and one of which is this weird reference in Elian that he says there's a type of dolphin in the Indian Ocean, so it's something he's not actually experiencing, that has sharp teeth and will attack people. So
Right.
it's just, I don't know, an anti-dolphin dolphin or something like
Yeah.
that. But that's a completely aberrant thing. He speaks favorably of actual Mediterranean dolphins
Yeah.
elsewhere. So I don't think there's many references that they're afraid of them or anything
No.
like that. But
Just
what's interesting too that you point out, they're in art quite a lot too.
constantly.
Um,
Yeah.
and we have no depiction, no realistic depiction of a whale in any extant picture or depiction of ancient Greek or Roman art. It just does
Yeah.
not appear. And I had claimed in that article I wrote on the canine aspects of sea monsters that there are no representations of sharks whatsoever. And the peer reviewer corrected me. There is
Mm.
one representation. And it's something that I and a lot of people have probably seen but passed over. If you Google, I mean, you've probably seen it. A lot of people have seen it. If you Google something like, Pompeii octopus mosaic, it's a very
Yeah.
famous image where the octopus is wrapped around a crawfish.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
if you look in the lower left-hand corner of that full mosaic, there's a depiction of a lemon shark there, and
Oh,
that
oh my God.
seems to be
I'm
the
Googling right now. Sorry.
the only depiction of a shark we have. And I completely missed that. So, um,
Oh, yeah. And it's so
yeah,
sharky.
yes, it's very recognizable too. Very clearly a
Yeah.
shark, and the rest are. I mean, some marine biologists might hate me for this, but the rest are look just like generic fish, you know. I'm not a
Yeah.
fish expert, so what do I know? But
No, but
yeah,
that does look, oh, what a
it's
cutie.
very distinctive, isn't it? Like you could
Yeah.
see that in the ancient world and be like, that's something different from a normal fish or something. It's
Yeah.
recognizable. We need to
Well, and
give that a name.
yeah, it's interesting too to have it be, I mean, Pompeii for one, so like somewhat late. And then also what you said about Elian, talking about scary dolphins or like dangerous dolphins. Like Elian is also very late. And so it's just an interesting thing because I mean, like mythologically and so I assume historically as well, like dolphins are a very early concept in Greek myth and
Hmm.
like connected. I mean, Delphi is connected to dolphin, right? Because the dolphin is like is sacred to Apollo, and there's this whole, and let alone the story of Dionysus transforming all the pirates into dolphins and them jumping overboard. Like there's a lot of references to dolphins, so it's just interesting the way they've sort of been separate
Yeah.
from these Kitai, and also fascinating that there isn't a depiction of a whale at all.
Yes, exactly, and it's my because when you get representations in the Christian period of Jonah's story, it will be a ketos, and it will be
Yeah.
something that's dog-like or in serpentine-like, because the reason we call it a whale in modern culture that really only began in the 16th century when translations of the Bible are trying to rationalize what's going on there. So
Right.
the nameless sea monster became a whale because they thought, kind of well, a whale can swallow a person, so that makes sense as a translation, but of course it doesn't bear out, but that's why we have that. But you see in
Yeah.
ancient art, sometimes the thing that swallows Jonah is just a very slender serpentine thing. It doesn't have to be a big portly whale. Um,
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of just Greek depictions of sea monsters too, which are in to my like immediate memory very big scary fish, but very much
mhm.
fish
Yeah,
rather than whale and not shark, which is, like which is, yeah, generally fascinating. I mean, it makes sense, like whales are the only thing big enough to swallow a human whole.
yes.
But I mean, other than that, yeah, what is it that makes a Kita directly a whale, other than we know that whales exist and that's the only thing that it,
Yes.
physically could have been big enough.
There was
Yeah.
another scholar that published something on the archaeology of whale bones, who had a
Cool.
very good point of saying that the whale in antiquity it's covered by a veil of the uncanny. So it's not just you walk down the street and you see a cat or a dog or something. This isn't a very mysterious animal to you,
Mhm.
but whales you only really capture a fleeting glimpse, or you might see a half rotting corpse on the beach or something, but it's always some sort of distorted or mysterious image. And
Yeah.
that really impacts, it seems, the way that they are depicting and thinking about these, that they don't have a clear image in art or anything, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we talked about this last time, but there must be orcas of some kind in the Med, because those that would be like an interesting format of like, it's a whale but also it has teeth slash
Yes.
eats, meat.
Yeah. So, and orca is actually a Latin word originally. We have this word, but the thing that I've had to say too is when you have these cases, the ancient word in Latin doesn't necessarily correspond to modern ones, as deceptive
Totally.
as that is. But we do have a very fun reference in Pliny the Elder that apparently during the reign of Claudian, a sea monster that he calls an orca at least
Mm.
wandered into one of the harbors at Ostia, and it's said that Claudian, got out soldiers to try and detain the beast. However, this was going to work. You imagine being
Detain
on,
it.
yes, being on duty that day, and the emperor's like, "You get out there with a net or some shit, and you know, bring this up on land for me." And you're like, "Yes, sir." But it's plenty. He doesn't tell whether they successfully killed it or anything like that. It's just soldiers
Yeah.
trying to spear it. But he does say, and it might be an orca. This might be exaggerated. That the sort of it spouts out water, and that overturned one of the ships of the soldiers that
Oh.
was trying to detain it. So it seems it's implied a sort of like accidental thing because Pliny has a lot of, he's a very big nature person, and he likes to tell stories and point out cases where like nature got one up on the people or
Right.
something like that. So
Right.
that seems to be his purpose in telling
Yeah.
that. But it's very fascinating. You have that was thought to, hey, we got to detain this weird thing in the harbor, guys.
To use the word
And just
detain is just delightful too.
yes,
There's something about that very specifically. Detain that whale.
we'll do something with it.
Yeah. I mean, I truly I could talk about this forever. It has been an hour and a half, so I'm trying to keep, but is there anything that you want, like more that you want to make sure you get in here, because I would like to hear more if you have
I
it.
have another shark bit for you
Oh,
in a
great.
way.
Please.
That it's not quite a fragment, but it's an interesting, very unexpected piece that I definitely didn't know of before. But I mean, going on this, I mean, we don't have a direct answer from the beginning why from Homer onward they call sea dogs, right?
Yeah.
But we have this interesting bit, not in any of the nature writing by Pliny or Elian or anything. We have it in Galen, the medical writer, who mentions this because
Interesting.
he is getting into this very philosophical discussion about diseases. And he brings up the issue, well, why do we call all diseases diseases? Because, each disease has a different effect on you. One makes you have chills, one makes you burn up, blah, blah, blah. Yet we all call these things disease. We all have one name for it. And the reason he says for that is that diseases, they all have the same form. In Greek, it's eidos, and form here this is the word that Plato is using for the forms. So it's not necessarily external, outward form. It's like an inner essential characteristic.
Yeah.
And then Galen gives the example of, well, this thing with calling all diseases is the same way with the reasons that we call sea dogs, because both dogs and sea dogs, they have a shared ethos, a shared form.
Hmm.
And so the point he seems to be acknowledging is that a shark and an actual dog, they look completely different outwardly. This is why I think modern audiences have trouble with this sort of thing, because if you define a dog, what is dog like or canine is four legs, a tail, and furry. Well, that's not a shark. But if you define it as some sort of internal characteristic like that, maybe that it bites or something like that, then
Mm-hmm.
yes, maybe that is a sort of canine like animal. And this seems to bear out with other things that you find too. We have some, it's about 4 centuries later, Isidore of Seville, who's writing in Latin, he has all these etymologies in this text. He
Ooh.
says to us that, well, we call sea dogs because they bite. So that
Right.
seems to be, it's a behavioral characteristic there.
Yeah.
So it's just a different way of considering what is dog like, really, it seems. And it's just very odd to us, but it made sense for their culture, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and it again does make sense when we think about this, like Kitai all kind of falling
Mm-hmm.
under this umbrella, and how it's like, okay, we know today, there's all these different species, and was it a whale, was it a shark, was it a seal, whatever. But yeah, if you are conceptualizing a ketos as being, this scary thing in the sea that maybe bites, maybe that's part of
Mm-hmm.
it too. Like if
Yes.
that's part of it, then yeah, all of these things certainly fall under the same umbrella, and especially when you think about how mysterious it all would be, because I think that's the thing that like just can't be understated about these sea creatures is that
Mm-hmm.
they can't see where they live, where they go, what they do. Like they just get these brief glimpses, or maybe someone falls off a ship and then suddenly it's bloody and there's a leg floating, and you can
Exactly.
tell I've watched a lot of shark movies, but like, it's that's all they would know.
Yes.
And when you're in the depths of the Med and it's the wine dark sea and you can't see into it at all, like, yeah, it
Yes.
would just be this super mysterious, scary place full of monsters.
Yes, and that's a good way to characterize it, because I think sometimes people, the ancient Greece and ancient Rome, they're very sea adjacent societies. They sailed regularly. Rome will claim to have conquered the sea and all of that, but really
Who
they
was
only
the guy who
conquered.
tried to fight it? The one guy.
Oh, Caligula.
Thank
Yes.
you. I know somebody tried to fight the sea.
Yes.
Little
It
bit.
didn't go well for him
No.
in a lot of ways. But really, I mean, because they, at best, you can only conquer, the surface of the sea, because
Yeah.
you can't, there's no diving technology. You can only go as far into the depths as you can hold your breath for, I don't know, a few meters or so. So it's this very
Yeah.
sort of eerie void of the unknown in the middle of your empire for the Romans. It's
Yeah.
very much like modern space travel. We've only really skimmed the surface of outer space today. It's just the rest of it is a gigantic void, in a sense, that we're interested in, but it's very eerie in a lot of ways, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can't, yeah, there's no exploration, then there's no visualization, there's just
Hmm.
nothing.
Yeah, and that just leaves room for interesting things like
Yeah.
this.
Big
And
old
so,
monsters.
I mean, the last thing I would say, and then I'll give the discount code as well for your audience that are definitely itching for this, is that, I've done this and I've broken this material down into three traditions, essentially, and I've put together it's hundreds of textual references and hundreds of artistic sources in this book from Greco-Roman antiquity. But I also want to say, and I say this in the conclusion as well, there is still much to be done with this topic. So if you are a researcher or an undergrad or someone that is maybe looking to do another PhD thesis on sea monsters or an article or something, there is a lot of material out there. I've talked a little bit about the serpentine stuff here. There was a friend of mine and a good academic colleague, Dominic Ingemark, who he's now published an article on the sort of eels in the
Ooh.
ancient world, that a lot of this can account for certain references to dragons and serpentine sea monsters. So I didn't
Mhm.
have time. I've got a brief reference to that in the book, but didn't really have time to incorporate it fully. But that's another example of he's definitely doing something different, and it is a good addition. And there's other things too, that the Kitos, it might have died out in the modern world, but it seems to spread in other places. Some people have thought it might spread, well, it did spread, we do know this for sure, into Indian art, and it seems to have influenced some depictions of the Indian sea monster, the Makara, as well. Some people have theorized it influenced the Chinese dragon. That might be a bit more speculative, but those are areas that I don't really know, so I don't really get
Yeah.
into that. But those are areas fruitful for study. And same sort of thing. The Jonah story becomes a big story in Islam as well. So there is
Mm.
a question: how much does the Kitas influence those depictions and those ideas of sea monsters? Tons to do in the medieval stuff and the Etruscan material too. There's
Ooh.
lots of representation. So I just wanted to say that, if this is a topic you're interested in, don't sort of be down on, oh shit, this guy's already written the comprehensive book, because it is not the case. I'm writing a sort of Byzantine sea monsters article now myself. There's tons more to be done here, both within the Greco-Roman world and elsewhere. So if this is something you like and you want to research it, tons of stuff out there. I would love to see other people, whether you agree with my assessment or not. It's always good to have competing opinions on things too.
It's my favorite part about working with academics because it just like everyone just wants more people to be researching because truly, and again, this is a reminder of why it's about humanity,
Mm-hmm.
singular, and the study of, because we with everything, there's always room for fresh interpretation and fresh research, but specifically interpretation because everything is biased by the based on the human that is interpreting it, and that is the wonder of humanity. Like that's a good thing. And I mean, it's why I've been doing this show for almost 10 years, and I've done the same story like four different times. Or even you and I are having what is ostensibly a very similar conversation to 4 years ago, but I know is a completely different conversation to 4 years ago, because that is just how human interaction and interpretation works. And it's lovely to hear that. I mean, I think most academics feel that way too, which is so nice, of just like, no, everyone come research this thing. We can all learn about it. And then we're all just going to learn from each other and then build off of each
Yes.
other. And it just gets bigger and better. And it's exactly why we need the humanities. So it's a
Yes.
perfect
That is a
reminder.
yes, absolutely perfect. So yeah, exactly that. If you have competing ideas, or you want to correct me on something, I'm happy to be corrected too. So if someone does know of a Greco-Roman representation of a whale or another
Oh
shark,
my God, yeah. Tell
please
us
let me
both,
know.
though. Yeah, me too,
Yes,
because I would
CC
really
us
like to
both in
know.
the
Yeah.
email.
Yeah, and oh no, that's the best thing about learning, and why I don't
Yes,
understand why people want AI at all, because like the
exactly.
learning is the fucking fun, and talking about it with other people too, like that always expands the ideas, always. Like you can research something to the ends of the earth, but the second you start talking about it to another person, you're going to get a completely
Hmm.
new idea from it,
Yes,
and that is such a good thing. And
exactly.
yeah.
Why we need the humanities more than ever.
Exactly. And also why I love having these conversations. So thank you again for doing
Yes,
it.
thank you for having me.
Oh,
So yeah, I mean the thing I said at the beginning, the discount code, the
yeah.
discount code, and I didn't even ask them to put it as this. They did this themselves. The discount code is Sea Monsters, all one word, and that will get you 35% off of the book price. So very generous, and we thank Bloomsbury for that. The couple of caveats to give for it: it's valid only for pre-orders up until September 2nd. So the book itself comes out on September 3rd. So you just got to pre-order it before then. And I think the money doesn't come out until it's actually shipped as well.
Yeah, right.
And the other big thing is I mean, the code is not valid for shipping to the EU. Anywhere else in the world, it is good for a 35% discount on the hardback. So that's code
Amazing.
Sea Monsters there,
Sea
all one
monster.
word. And
Amazing.
there you go.
Yeah, and it'll
But
be linked in the episode's description, so it'll be easy to find. And again, that's so great. I love that, yeah, that they gave a discount, that it's such a high discount that makes it so accessible, and I hope that it means you get lots of book sales.
yeah.
And also, I mean, I don't know how, it works on the academic side, but pre-order sales always count towards the first days sales, which is why they matter. And I think
Mhm.
everyone could use to know
Yes.
that.
And I mean, another thing, if you just don't have the money for it, remember you can always ask your local library to potentially purchase it. And same thing, if they enter in the code, it's only on Bloomsbury's website, which will give you the link there. They still get 35% off your local library or your university library if you're there. And in some ways, getting a library to order it is actually better because this helps out the humanities. It helps more people. It lets your librarians know what sort of books you want to be stocked, and just lets other people get access to it. So if purchasing it by yourself is not possible, then yeah, consider that option. And that is one of those small things you can do to support the humanities too.
That's such a good general reminder too, because even if you want to buy it yourself, you can
Hmm.
also suggest that your local library buy it too. And that's true of all books and all libraries, and a very good and timely reminder to everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this again. I'm always so thrilled to speak with you, and also love that you are always sending me more people to have on the
I
show.
will continue to do so.
It's the best. You are the one I can count on for that always, and I really appreciate it. And also, it's just nice to know I'll have a fun conversation about monsters with somebody. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you again.
Uh, Agreed. Same here. Do you have anything else you want to share in terms of like following you or reading more other than the book?
I mean, this will be in the future. I mean, you can find all of my projects. Just Google my name, pretty much. And I mean, the best is my academic CV on academia.edu. All the links to all my articles and stuff. This will be in the future. This is coming down the line. I actually have to write it first, but I have a contract for a second book already, and it's going to be a book on Triton, the god that we mentioned before. It's going to be for Routledge's God, or what is it, Gods and Heroes of the Ancient World series. Um, it is under contract, and it's, yeah, I just have to
That's
write it now
exciting.
is the thing. But basically a big study from Hesiod all the way actually up to the modern representations of Triton. So that will be
Like straight
coming.
out of Little Mermaid?
Yes, probably because yes, that's the name
That
of
is the
her
king's name. Yeah.
father. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that will be there too at some point. Again, I don't know when because I have to write it, and
Fair.
by the time that you submit it, it takes a year or so with academic publishing. So
Yeah.
at
That's
some
fun.
point that will be out.
That's
I,
great though. I didn't I like I feel like there's not a lot of text. We'll talk about this again when the book comes out.
Yes.
And I won't ask you too many questions now. But I feel like, yeah, it's mostly going to be like visual that you're working with, right?
Yes, it is going to be a very art heavy, because the sort of, in classics we have a standard Greek database of text. If you put in the word ketos in that, you get about 3,000 results. If you put in the word Triton, you get about 250. So
Yeah,
that's a good indication of the relative difference. It's partially why
Yeah.
this is stretching into modern stuff as well, because there's just fewer there. Which is
Yeah.
not to say Triton's obscure or anything. It's just kind of an accident of sources in a lot of ways too.
No, totally. And it's one where like visually very represented, which is why
Yeah.
it's interesting. And again, but like minimal text. I know, because I feel like I've tried to cover, I mean, I've tried to cover any like sea deities as much as possible. I'm just like, there is minimal sourcing.
Yes, it's and that's why it's fun to do in a lot of ways. You
Yeah.
learn a lot more about the minor gods in a way. I mean, you could do a multi-volume series on Poseidon probably, but there's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
background stuff you can get by looking at the more minor figures too. So
Yeah.
that will be in the future sometime.
Delightful. Well, you'll have to come back on the show. I know I can expect that you will. So
Yes.
please. Well, thank you as always, because this was really fun.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Let's Talk About Myths Baby is written and produced by Liv Albert. You all know her. Michaela Pangowish is the Hermes to all your Olympians. The producer, tired, actually done with school. What do I do with my evenings? I don't know. Select music by Luke Chaos. Thank you, Mr. Chaos. The podcast is part of the Memory Collective Podcast Network, a collection of creators that all strive to bring you accurate and reliable information on the ancient world. These include the wonderful friends at Movies We Dig, the Partial Historian, Sweet Bitter, and so much more. Get ad-free episodes and other things by subscription to the Oracle Edition on Patreon at patreon.com/mythsbaby or via the link in the episode's description. If you, I don't know, are someone who has some sort of experience in antiquity and expertise and would like to talk to us on the show about it, we'd love to hear from you. Please go to www.mythsbaby.com/contact and fill out the contact form there, and we'd love to hear from you all. All right, I'll see you all later, and I promise there's Herodotus next week. Love you all. Bye.